Hi everyone, it's Rio CloudSync. In today's session, we're focusing on pushing out conditional access policies at scale to our customer tenants. Now, first things first, we need to access the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, and we can do that via entra.microsoft.com. Please make sure you have either global administrator rights, which can be found here, or conditional access administration rights to be able to configure conditional access policies and also push them out to the wider customer tenants. Now, once you're in the Entra console, on the left-hand service pane where we find Entra ID, you'll see that there's a conditional access service pane. This will take you to the conditional access configuration wizard, where we could do many things, right? One of those things be create a custom conditional access policy. And for those who don't know what a conditional access policy is, a conditional access policy in simple terms is an if-then statement. If this happens, or if this satisfies these conditions, then we want to push out these controls, right? An example of a conditional access policy could be when I'm in my trusted location, being my office, I don't need to satisfy multi-factor authentication requirements. However, when I'm outside my safe location, being my office, I need to go through MFA, right? That's an example of a conditional access policy customers typically configure. Alternatively, it could be I can only access my line of business applications or my SharePoint intranet site unless I have a compliant device. So if I don't have a compliant device, I can't access my SharePoint communication sites. Right? Once more, there's a whole load of flexibility and granularity when it comes to conditional access policies. So, like I said, we can create custom conditional access policies through the Create New Policy wizard here, but we can also use the out-of-box templates. Now, here we do have several categories, being key categories, such as securing foundations from ground upwards. We also have the ability to create conditional access policies based on zero trust methodology. And if we know anything about zero trust, that looks at three key principles, right? Least privilege, verify explicitly, and assume breach. We also have remote workers, protected administration accounts, and also emerging threats. Now, some of the conditional access policies in these templates do overlap, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, once again, this is great. We can view these conditional access templates and we can, let's say, assess the configuration before pushing this out to our wider customer tenants. So for this particular template, we're looking at requiring MFA for administrators, right? And what we're looking at here is it's going to be called require MFA for admins, so that's the template name. It's going to exclude current user, being myself, because of course best practice is always to have a break glass account. And it's going to include all these directory roles from global administrator, security admin, SharePoint admin, so on and so forth. Not only that, it's assigned at the scope level to all cloud applications, being Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, so on and so forth. And the access control is require multi-factor authentication. So what we're saying in essence is anyone in scope, being any of these privileged roles, accessing any M365 SaaS application will have to satisfy multi-factor authentication. So that's great. And we can push out these templates on a, let's say, a manual basis. Not only that, I can come back into conditional access and I can also create a new policy here. And I can run through the conditional access policy wizard where I can configure those settings manually. But once again, there's a time element and there's a whole lot of other considerations we need to take into account. On the left-hand side, we've got the management actions. Once more, we would have to configure that manually, right? So how do we, let's say, not automatize this, but make ourselves more efficient, save our time, alleviate some mundane tasks which could potentially be pushed out automatically? Well, that's where the admin center comes into play. So if we access admin.microsoft.com, believe it or not, we can start pushing out these conditional access policies at scale. So if we press show all, what we'll see on the left-hand service pane is there's a setup button, right? So we'll select setup. And typically we go in here to set up Microsoft Syntex for Microsoft Backup and Archive, and also some of the OCR capabilities. But if we scroll down, a whole load of people miss this configuration. We can actually select Configure MFA, And not only that, we can set up custom domains, we can register SSPR from this service pane, we can also set passwords to never expire. So it's a quick and easy way of, let's say, pushing out configuration out the box. So what we've got here is the option to deploy conditional access policies, and you'll see it gives us a bit of a synopsis on, what we're going to go through. So deploy conditional access policy templates. Microcentric conditional access uses policies to automate access decisions, what we've already been through. It looks at signals such as user, device, and location to enforce access roles. So it's just taking you through what a conditional access policy is, and the goals for an organization and an administrator. So to empower the user to be more productive anytime, anywhere, and also to protect your organizational assets. And there's a few resources on the right hand side as well, which I'm assuming will just take you to either the Microsoft documentation or the Learn collateral. So if we press get started, what we've got here is a quick note. Right, so there's a few bits of information here we need to take into consideration. One, the licensing. Of course, if you're on Entry ID Plan 1, you can push out conditional access policies as is, fine. However, if you're on Entry ID Plan 2, you can set up conditional access policies with integration into identity protection. So starting to leverage and utilize some of the user risk, sign-in risk policies alongside CA. So that's what that's kind of stating there, right? Not only that, any existing MFA settings will remain unchanged, because part and parcel of this wizard here is going to ask us to decipher what authentication methods we want to use across the board as well. But some of these are derived from the org-wide settings in the Entra dashboard, which are found in the authentication methods service pane here. Okay, so some of these may supersede some of the wizard options we have been made available in here. Not only that, to prevent accidental lockouts, we want to create an emergency account, right? So in other words, a break glass account, which we would typically exclude in the CA policies we configure. As per what this screen says here, right? It may be there's unforeseen circumstances like a natural disaster affecting network availability. Therefore, we may need someone else to access the conditional access policies or disable it or move it to a report only mode. One of your global admins may have left the organization, albeit on good or bad terms. Once again, we need to be able to bootstrap our way back in to the console to be able to disable or enable the policies as and when. Now, if I scroll down further, we can review and manage existing policies. So what this will review is any existing policies in my organization, right? So we can see here I've got one for block access to Office apps, which is currently in report only. So we're auditing it for the time being. It was created at this date and modified never at this moment in time. We've got a few CA policies here for blocking legacy authentication, such as IMAP and POP. Once again, that's on. We can revert that to report only state or turn off, and we can see when it was created and when it was last modified. And if we scroll to the right even further, we can see whether or not this was deployed via a template, being the templates I just showed you in the Entra console, or manually through the custom configuration. So once again, we can review what's already configured. So when we do go ahead and deploy the conditional access policies through the service pane, there's not let's say, a conflict of interest in conditions and access controls. And if I was to go back to CA, CA here, you can see the existing policies, which of course reflect what we've just seen there, right? So if I come back into the admin center, we can see the template categories. So similar to the template categories we saw in here, where we go new policy from template, they're being pulled into the admin center. And let's say I pick zero trust, for example, which is the recommended category. I can review category definitions and see exactly what conditional access policies fall under the zero trust pillar. And we know, like I said earlier, what zero trust is. And it's what many organizations are trying or on the journey to align themselves to, right? Which is least privilege, verify explicitly, and assume breach. And here's a whole load of policies which can be pushed out through this single pillar, right? Require MFA for admins, block legacy auth, non-persistent browser sessions, anything to do, like I said, with risky sign-ins will require a P2 license. If you don't have the applicable license, it won't push out the CA policy, which is cool. And of course, we've got the other categories here. And like I said, some of them may overlap. So these are just a series of conditional access policies which fall under each pillar. Now, with that being said, if I select Zero Trust as a category, I can press Next. It will then list me those policies we just saw in the definitions here, of which I can tick the ones I want to deploy to my customer tenant. So the next step is to assess this list of conditional access policies and pick and select the most appropriate ones you want to configure and push out to your organization. Of course, these conditional access policies we see in this list here fall under the Zero Trust pillar. However, many of these conditional access policies will overlap with other pillars we showcased earlier. Now, if I look at this list, I know I've already got some of these conditional access policies configured, such as requiring MFA for administrators and blocking legacy authentication. So I'm not going to bother with those conditional access policies for the time being. I'm actually going to select one I don't already have, which is non-persistent browser sessions for unmanaged devices. So if I select this one, it will ask me to define whether or not I want to enable this conditional access policy out the box. If I want to leave it in report only, being audit mode, and monitor the sign-in logs for the time being, and this is the default option, or leave it in the disabled state but still create the conditional access policy. So I'm going to leave in a report only state for the time being because I want to monitor it. Now, how do I assess the configuration before pushing out? Well, I can review the policy template definitions, and this will provide me a list of all these CA policies of which I can select and pick, and it will showcase to me the configurations. So if I scroll down and find that non-persistent browser session CA policy, you can see here it falls under not only the Zero Trust pillar, but also the remote worker pillar. Now, if I select this, it will take me and let's say show me a synopsis of the configuration. So for this particular CA policy, it's scoped to all users. Is excluding me as a current user. So when we talked about break glass scenarios, I am that break glass account for the time being. It's scoped to all cloud applications, and the filter for devices is if the device trust does not equal Entra joined and is not compliant based on MDM, Microsoft Intune, then we want to enforce a session sign-in frequency of 1 hour and persistent browser session of never persistent. So if I scroll up, we'll actually see what this actually means. So we're protecting user access on unmanaged devices by preventing browser sessions from remaining signed in after the browser is closed and setting a sign-in frequency to 1 hour. So we've got a nice little synopsis of the configuration here. And if I come out of here, I can then go next. Now, next will take me to another service pane where I can choose the MFA auth methods for my organization. So, like I said earlier, if you've already selected the authentication methods in the new authentication methods blade and Entra ID, actually you'll find that they're already defined for you, right? And the options you see here, which are grayed out, are already derived from Entra. So we know that the authenticator app is already enabled from an org-wide level, right? With, of course, number matching, because that's the most appropriate way of completing multi-factor authentication if you're not using passwordless authentication, that is. However, we do have the option for phishing-resistant auth methods such as FIDO2 Alliance keys, so fast identity online, being or now called pass keys. It's like a YubiKey key you plug into your laptop. There's also certificate-based authentication, which is built on PKI, so public key infrastructure, with the public-private key pairs. And then, of course, it breaks it down from high security, medium security, and low security. Of course, high being your phishing resistant and your passwordless authentication. That's where the world is heading. That's where people are moving to. We've then got the medium security, such as temporary access pass, which is the ability to bootstrap your way back into a device. Let's say if you've lost or your device has been stolen. And then, of course, we've got low security being SMS and phone call. And as per the policy tip here, the following auth methods could be vulnerable to SIM adversaries or attacks or other hacking methods. So it's not recommended using SMS or phone call, albeit if you are using SSPR, like self-service password reset, you still have the option to use those particular authentication methods. Now, if I press next, it will just provide us a summary of what we configured thus far, albeit I'm only configuring one CA policy. Like I said, there's a list there you can select from, and you can push out, let's say, 8 CA policies at once, right? So I'm going to attest that I've selected the low security auth method that could be hacked via SIM hacking or other methods. These are just defined from the Entra, like I said, authentication methods blade. And the only reason I've got SMS enabled is because I'm using SSPR. So if I select an option, we'll look through the list here. My users don't want to install. The authenticator app is too hard to use. I don't understand the risks. I'm going to just do other for the time being and say SSPR in use. Once I've done that, once again, review the CA process I'm pushing out, and I can press Save Configuration. So we'll wait for this to load, and it's finished. So what the other options we get here is we can manage conditional access policies, so the ones we've already configured, like I showed you earlier. We could download the Authenticator app, and we could also email an announcement to the organization, which is quite useful. So if I press Done, and I go back to Entra, and I scroll down to conditional access, I should see that conditional access policy we've deployed through the M365 Admin Center. So if I, let's say, refresh, you can see that conditional access policy shown here for non-persistent browser session, and it's being put in report only and was created on this date at this time. So this was a quick video on pushing out conditional access policies at scale through the M365 Admin Center. Any questions, please do let me know. Thank you very much.